So, Will, here we are, another episode of Thriving in Business and Life, and we've got a really cool guest. I'm excited about it.
No kidding. This guy's amazing, and what a life, making all these movies and culminating in a documentary on mindfulness with Thich Nhat Hanh, and now this book that's coming out, A Touch of Madness.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the scope of this guy, Lawrence Kasanoff,
Platoon.
he's done Mortal Kombat. I mean,
Dirty Dancing.
Yeah, so many movies, and he's just a gem of a guy with some really wise advice that he's gleaned over the years of producing movies and taking chances and learning a lot of wisdom. So fasten your seatbelts, everybody. It's going to be a really fun discussion. Absolutely. I've just totally been loving your book for so many reasons.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great title.
Yeah, good title, right? I like the title.
Yeah.
It seems right. Yeah. It's good.
Well,
reminded me of that Kurt Vonnegut quote about something like, in a crazy world, the person people think is mad is actually sane. I'm fracturing it. Something like that. Something like that.
Yeah. Kurt Vonnegut was one of the editors of the school newspaper at college that I was the publisher of. So for our 100th year anniversary, we had Kurt Vonnegut back for a day and a night to speak and hang out with us. Oh, it was great.
I was telling Will, he and I have this whole thing about playing, living life like you're playing a game.
Right.
And, it's kind of when we're working with clients now as coaches and so on, a lot of what we're encouraging them to do is decide what role do you want to take on in this situation? How do you want it to end? How do you need to show up? And I was reading I think it's in your later chapters where you talk about that.
Play like a game.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like that's something you adopted early on in your own journey.
I did, and I think it's great. I think you have to play it like a game. It doesn't mean don't take it seriously. I mean, a football player playing a game and takes it seriously, but it's even harder to do now than it used to be because everything is more corporatized. There used to be more scoundrels and there used to be more crazy people, and it's a little harder now to do that. But I think all the more reason why you have to do it, and I think the audience is really, really, really craving more play. It's just too serious and too oppressive and too hard. And I think it's not only fun, but I think you actually make better decisions when you're in a state of play. You don't get mad. It's kind of funny. You can see the things. You can be more creative. You're more open. You're more relaxed. So I just think the whole world needs more play and fun. And I think fun is wildly underrated today.
Totally agree.
I've really been looking forward to talking to you and asking you to share a little bit about your personal journey, because just looking into you online, I mean, what a life you've led. And, just going from Food Fight to the documentary on mindfulness to this book, how did that happen? I mean, what was like the turning point? How did you evolve from that way back then to where you are now? It looks like a fascinating journey.
Well, I mean, have I evolved? That's a good question. I wanted to be a movie producer since I was, read this in the book, but maybe for your audience, I wanted to be a movie producer since I was a little kid. And I always knew what I wanted to do. And I got very lucky. And when I got out of school, I became head of film production and acquisition at Vestron, which was a company riding the wave of the home video boom in the mid 1980s. And the home video boom was like today's Netflix boom. They built 1 million home video stores and they needed movies to fill those shelves, and we were going to make them. And so that's what I call a content gold rush. And today with streaming is another content gold rush. So my job, right, fresh out of school, was to make 80 movies a year, 80. Buy them, make them, co-produce them, finance them. We don't care. If you lose money, you're fired, kid. So, and we didn't have a lot of money per movie. So we made, romantic comedies and low budget horror movies and action movies and stuff like that. Very commercial stuff. And then along comes a script called Platoon, which I thought was great, even though it was not the kind of movie we made. It was a very serious script about the Vietnam War and what happened to the kids in it. All the people in it became stars, but they weren't stars at the time, which was also against our rule to not have cast. And the tagline of the movie was, the first casualty of war is innocence. But I wanted to make it. And my boss said, you're crazy. This isn't what we do. And I fought, and he said, okay, you're the head of production. You can do it if you want. But there's always a but. If you fail, you're fired. And he fired people left, right. He was not bluffing. I didn't know what to do. But then I thought, well, I guess I didn't get into the movie business to play it safe. So I greenlit Platoon. And when I saw it, finally finished the first time in Italy early one morning, I'm the only person to ever see Platoon the first time and giggle their way through it. Not because it wasn't great, but because I was like, oh my God, I'm not getting fired. I'm not getting fired. It's good. And it was so good that very fortunately it won Best Picture that year at the Academy Awards. And a few months later, I ran into Oliver Stone, the producer, in a bar in New York. He bought me a drink and he said, kid, I always like you. You have a touch of the madness. And I thought, a touch of the madness? A little bit. Is he calling me crazy? Am I crazy? And then I thought, well, my boss was crazy to give a 25-year-old kid an 80-picture film slate to run with no prior experience. Oliver was crazy to insist on making as his second movie a Vietnam movie when no one ever had. And I was crazy to bet the best job in the world on it when I was only like 12 or 18 months into the job. And then it occurred to me that a touch of the madness is what you need, I think, in life, but certainly in a business like this. You have to be a little crazy to be more creative. And why is being creative or innovative important? And here's why I think it is. Because the current of the river of life will always pull you towards the middle. When you're sleeping, when you're not paying attention, it'll always pull you towards the middle. It's not good enough. Don't be crazy. Play it safe. And that's okay if you want to live that life. But if you want to make great, innovative things, the audience wants the new and the different. You have to swim away from that current. And the best tool you have to do it with, I believe, is a touch of the madness. And it's not just in your idea, it's in your dogged pursuit of it, it's in never giving up, it's in the whole thing. And I've tried to live that way my entire life. So I'm not sure I've evolved into it. I've simply constantly tried to stay swimming against that current into a touch of the madness, which led me into starting my own animation studio. Food Fight was one of the projects we did, but we've done 50 projects there now. And Mindfulness, which is a movie I made about Thich Nhat Hanh, the very well-known Zen Buddhist monk, was because this very peaceful, well-known Buddhist monk who wrote 100 books and was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize and brought mindfulness to the West. I called this peaceful Buddhist monk because I thought he'd be good inspiration for a character in one of my Mortal Kombat movies, not really thinking that a Buddhist monk maybe didn't want to be an inspiration for a violent movie like Mortal Kombat. But a funny thing happened because I was in a great state when I went to see him. It was after 2 hours, I was like, I felt like I've been on vacation for 2 months. What's your secret? And he said, no secret, practice. And I said, you mean I could learn this? And I became friends with him and some of the other monks and sisters. And I really started loving it. And I invited them to LA. And I said, if you come to LA, I'll get a bunch of filmmakers because we should all be putting this in movies. And he said, how about Tuesday? And I had all these filmmakers over and studio heads and they loved it. And then he asked me to do a documentary, which I'd never done before. I'm not really a documentary guy, but I just love his message, which is peace in yourself, peace in the world. And I thought, well, I think I know how to make movies. Maybe I could help get his message out there. And I did it. And unfortunately, he passed away recently. And I not too long ago went, right before it came out, I found him recuperating I went to see him recuperating on a mountain in Thailand in the middle of the jungle. It was like in a movie. And I got to show it to him when he kind of held my hand and squeezed it, and he couldn't really speak then, but he was very aware. And so that's why I made the documentary. But I think that's a good thing about what we were talking about. If I was in a different state, when I met Thich Nhat Hanh to be in Mortal Kombat, and I wasn't in a relaxed state because of him, because he knew how to do that, I would have said, well, he's not good for Mortal Kombat. The hell with it. But in a relaxed state, in a state of play, in a state of madness, I thought, wait a minute, forget about the movie. Then what an amazing person this is. And mindfulness really did change me. It really did have a great effect on me. But only the same thing. It allows me certainly to be calmer and more open and more aware and to embrace the madness more. So I think it's all a constant journey. But I've been very, very focused on what I want and what I want to achieve and what I want to do. It's just a question of how to get there.
Yeah, that's what a great story and an experience. I think as you're talking about that, two things came to mind. One was, like you said, in that state of a touch of madness and play, we're just in a far more creative frame of mind, and there's so many other possibilities that occur to us. But there's something else. I think it's actually in the final part of your book you talk about the story of Sydney, and
Oh yeah.
I thought that was such a great message, because in a way, I think you were talking about how everybody gets pulled towards the middle. And maybe you can share just that quick little quip, because I think there's something really profound in it.
Sure. So Sidney dies and he goes to heaven, and God says, Sidney, I'm a little disappointed in you. And Sidney says, I know, I should have been more like my brother-in-law Sal. Sal left the business and he went into the pickle business, and boy, did he make money. He goes, no. God said, it's not that. And Sidney said, I know, I should have been more like Moses. Moses was a leader, and I didn't lead enough, and I followed. I never had bagels in my store till late. And he goes, no, not Moses. And Sidney said, Jacob, I should have been more like Jacob. Now that guy, he was understanding and I should have been more understanding when I found my wife in the jacuzzi with the neighbors. And no, God said, I'm not disappointed because you weren't more like Moses. I'm not disappointed because you weren't more like Jacob. And I'm not disappointed because you weren't more like David. I'm disappointed because you weren't more like Sidney. And it's such a simple message that I heard when I was a kid, and I never forgot it. And the real reason I wrote the book, A Touch of the Madness, is because I think people today are scared to be their true creative selves.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to hopefully inspire and motivate them to do that, to be more like Sidney. Whatever Sidney is, be Sidney. And if you have a crazy bagel idea, do it. Because it's that crazy idea in the back of your mind that the little voice is saying, well, it's cool, but no one will do it, and I don't know. And that's the one. And I think you should go for that. And that's why I wrote the book.
Well, and you talk about, stick with your idea.
Yep.
Which clearly you did with Platoon and a number of other things. It was crazy.
You got to stick to it. And so, great example of that in my world is, at Vestron, we got a hold of Dirty Dancing, and it was a mess when we got Dirty Dancing. It was not the movie you see now. It was not the script you see. It was a mess. And we brought in this wonderful, legendary producer named Jimmy Einer, who's now the partner in my company. And Jimmy was, among other things, a genius music producer and producer. And the song "Time of My Life" had been recorded as a high falsetto song. And it wasn't working. And Jimmy brought in a guy named Michael Lloyd, who's a great music producer and music supervisor. And they redid the song in a low, deeper voice. They got Bill Medley from the Righteous Brothers to do it as a favor. No one wanted to do it. And they sent out the song to everybody, the managers, the record company, the director of the movie. No one liked it. They all sent notes. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to change it. They got a million notes. And so they said, no problem, sure, said Jimmy and Michael, we'll do it. And so 3 weeks later, they sent out version 2, and they said, I hope you like the changes. And we did send it to some radio stations, and the radio stations like it, and they want to play it. And they got all these notes back saying, we love it. Thank you so much. It's fantastic you did that. And so what great musical change did Jimmy and Michael do between version 1 and version 2? And the answer is nothing. They didn't change a note. They just wrote version 2, but they doubled down. And even though no one liked it in their group, they sent it to radio stations, public. They knew their idea. They stuck with their idea. And as soon as everyone else read that the radio stations like it, oh, we love it, it's fantastic. They didn't do a thing. That's sticking with your idea. And that song that year won Grammy and Oscar for Best Song. And had they changed it, it wouldn't have. That's how you stick with your idea. You just double down and double down and double down and pick. That's it. That's not swimming towards the middle. That's one of the most successful songs in history now, because they both said, we're not going to do it. And they didn't go and have an argument. They just wrote version 2 and they sent it to more people. And because the more people liked it, everyone else, sheep came, and they were right.
That's so classic. It reminds me, Will, in his younger days was actually kind of, he and his brother were kind of like the Osmonds of Canada. And
country and Western, though. Country and Western.
And Everly Brothers. That's what reminded me of it, was Everly Brothers music. But I think the thing that everybody finds, and we spent time in the music business as well and had a small label and so on. And it was always finding that artist who had a real unique voice, who
Yeah.
knew who they were and wanted to be that. And so if we found one that we thought had something special, our whole thing was not to try to turn them into everybody else, but to figure out how can we get that voice out there for everybody to hear.
But
And
that's so great that you did that, because I think the opposite happens today, and especially in the music business, everyone tries so hard to be like everyone else, and then they're indistinguishable.
You're reminding me of one of Oscar Wilde's great quips, and he had a lot of them, but the one I love is, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken.
That's great. I never heard that.
well, and Will's written numerous books as well. He's got one also coming out, I think it was today. And we want to make sure we feature yours coming out in September and make everybody aware that that's coming out, Larry. But one of the things I love working with Will is the guy is endlessly creative. He knows how to create on a theme. So, if we're talking about play life like a game, he will go with that theme, and he just lets himself get in the flow, and there'll be another idea that comes and another idea, and they all line up in this succession of things that keep taking the idea further. And that's yeah. I don't know how you do that, Will, but I guess you go with the flow.
Well, I do, and I got to say, I'm really inspired, Larry, with your frame. Like, you get tugged to the middle, and I want to explore that a little more, because it seems like the three of us are all pretty creative, and we've kind of dared to be ourselves and do that. But I know a lot of people listening may not do that as kind of innately, as naturally. So would love to hear you share a little bit of advice for people who get the idea. They want to get out on the edges a little more, but they're afraid to do that. They're worried about the risk, what might go wrong. How can you give them a little bit of guidance there? I think that would be really helpful.
Well, I think there's a few things to do. First of all, you can start small. And so, and you don't have to do it with your biggest idea in the world, but you can start small just to get used to doing it. And I think the first thing you have to do is create something, whatever it is. And there's a lot of steps to that, but the most important one is to really figure out the essence of what you're doing. What are you really trying to get across in what you're creating? Mortal Kombat, when I made it, everyone told me my career was over because there'd never been a hit movie from a video game. But you know what my secret is? I don't think I made a hit movie from a video game. I made a hit movie from a story, which became a video game. And I call that story the essence of it. What's the essence of it? To me, the essence of Mortal Kombat, the very top of the period, is not the game. The game is one down from the period, one rung down. The essence, in my opinion, is empowerment. That's what martial arts is. That's what Mortal Kombat is, dressed in a great package. And so you have to figure out the essence of what you're doing. Why am I doing this? And once you figure out that essence, if it's right, you'll hang on to it. And then, as we said, you have to hang on to your idea. The second thing you have to do, and here's where you can really practice, is you have to ask. You have to ask everybody everything all the time. I wrote to the Pope recently, 2 minutes before we came on the podcast. I won't say what this is because we haven't done it. I'm going on a trip to a few countries, and I want to meet the president of one of the countries. And my staff came in and said, but we don't know the president. I said, did you read my book? Ask. You're just going to ask. And so I'd ask your readers, I'd ask you guys, well, you guys would do it, but I'd ask your listeners a question. If you could ask one living person in the world, anyone, one question, who would you ask what?
What a great question.
Most people don't know. And the reason they don't know is because it never occurs to them that they could. So we made a movie during the pandemic 2 years ago called Bobbleheads, an animated movie, and we used Cher, the iconic Cher, as a bobblehead, but we also used her, not only her voice, but her likeness. And when the movie came out, People magazine said to Cher in an interview, no one has ever, you've never done an animated movie before. Why did you do this one? And she said, I've never done an animated movie because no one ever asked me. I did. And if Cher, the most iconic woman on earth, is sitting there and no one ever asked her, can you imagine the people out there for you, whoever is listening, who you're not asking because you think, oh, they'll never listen, they'll never take my call, and maybe they never got asked. So you can start that very small. You can ask, Uncle Frank why he didn't come to the wedding, or you can call whoever you want, but ask, just and keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And then the third thing is, again, play it like a game. Just play it like a game. You know, as much as my ego would like to say otherwise, people say no to me all the time. Still, you just, so what? What the hell? So if you create your idea and you base it on the essence of the idea, what you really love about it, you ask anybody anything, and you really play it like a game, you'll start to get further. I mean, it takes practice, but you'll start to get further, and you will hopefully start to get over that driven to the middle and that fear. And you'll just do it, because you know what? If you ask enough people, someone's going to say yes.
You know, I gotta say, you're reminding me of one of my favorite scenes from the Blues Brothers, where John Belushi hits on, was it Christy Brinkley or something at a gas station? He says, "Meet me at midnight at the motel." And like, what an ask. I mean, this slob is asking this model. And somewhere later on in the film, you see her sitting in her convertible waiting for him. Like, she said yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You've got to do it. But the asking thing is really incredibly important, but you can also start small with that. You can start really small and ask, you know, as big or as small a question as you want. I honestly find it easier to ask for a bigger thing than I do a smaller thing. You know, I once was having trouble getting one animated movie made, so I decided, well, I'll ask them to make 12, and they said yes. You know, so
yeah,
so a lot of times too, you got to really go bigger. I mean, the opposite of your instinct is, I better not ask for more. You know, I was once selling the video game rights to one of my movies, and I was early in the day for that, and I mean early in the year for that, and I asked for a very small amount from one studio, and they said yes right away. And I said, really? And I went to another studio, and I asked for like 10 times as much, and they said yes. And I was like, holy crap. So, but I couldn't even almost get the words out. But you just got to ask. And then it's
brilliant.
Fun. You just got to play it. That's fun.
Well, and that's part of it too, is to not make the stakes so emotionally high for myself that I'm afraid to lose, that I'm afraid to get a no.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, 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 really right. You know, it's not you. I mean, the amount of, if you just think even through history of the amount of people, you know, Edison, 1,000 tries to get the light bulb. I mean, it gets on and on and on throughout history, and it's repeated. Yeah, and it's not you. And there are that I find a lot today. I think, you know, for whatever reason, I find a lot of people very, very, very sensitive to getting a no, or sensitive to criticism, and you just can't be, because people are scared. And so the person you're asking is just as scared as you are. What if they say yes to you and then they get in trouble? But, you know, we don't, you know, the movie business, especially, which not everyone is in, is making a movie, as you guys know, because of your experience, it's like a revolution. You're only a hero if you win. No one says, you know, that movie was terrible, but good for him for trying. You don't really get that. But, you know, people should, because you don't try to make a bad movie. So you just got to go. And, you know, I've been fortunate through Mortal Kombat to meet a lot of really champion fighters. And, you know, what I've noticed in these guys is the next round, the next punch, the next fight, it's like the last one didn't happen. You know, these guys can get slammed in the face, and 2 seconds later, it's gone. And now I got a chance to hit the guy back. And you got to think like that. Okay, next. Okay, next. Okay, next.
Well, you know, I'm thinking about, Will has written a number of books, and I wanted to ask you this, Will, because this, you know, with the new one you've got coming out right now, you know, not every book you've written has gotten kudos, but you keep writing and you keep writing and you keep writing, and you get passionate about something and you keep writing, and it doesn't ever seem to phase you. You there's something driving you to keep writing.
Yeah, well, you know, the joy is in the creating, and it's always nice when people say they like what you've created. But, you know, honestly, and I've been shocked to talk to so many even best-selling authors who confess that they hate writing. And I'm like, well, why the hell are you writing then? I mean, I do it because I love it. And, you know, I was thinking, Larry, as you were just talking, and I'd love to hear a little more about your book before we end here, that as we all know, a film that sucks for an hour 10, but has a great ending, tends to get remembered as a great film. Whereas a film that's really terrific and then bombs in the last 5 minutes, people walk out saying, well, that sucked. And I think the same is true of life. You know, we're all around the same age. And I know one of the things I do in my books is I always try and, encourage people not to make age a barrier. Like what you're saying about taking risks, being yourself, that's not for 20-year-olds. That's for anybody. And we can make our lives great, even if we've only got 5 or 10 years left to go, right?
Oh, I think so too. I think, the only thing left in almost in the world, or certainly in the country, that seems very acceptable, because everyone's becoming very open about things, is there is a crazy ageism. I mean, I don't think it matters how old everyone is. As I got older in life, I was shocked to realize everyone doesn't get better and more mature and more lovely as they get older. And I know people who are at 11, you can tell what they're going to be doing. I know people who at 70 are nuts. And yeah, I totally agree that it does not matter what. But I got to ask you, what's your new book?
The new book is called The Success Paradox: How to Surrender and Win in Business and Life. And it's a remarkable story. I was actually hired to write it for Forbes Books. That's the old business brand. And it tells the story of this guy, Gary Cooper, in South Carolina, workaholic, alcoholic, successful, but ended up getting a diagnosis. He had 1 month left to live. That's how much he trashed his body. So he turned his life around. He had a kind of a spiritual awakening. And the book is about what he did. His company's now worth $400 million. His family's reunited. He's healthy. He's sober, and it's an amazing read.
Great.
But it turns everything in business upside down. And
Wow.
says, do the opposite. Like, don't drive, rest, meditate every morning, be mindful, listen rather than speak. Don't drive towards success. Play. So a lot of it's in alignment with what I hear your book is about as well.
What a great story. Wow. I hear that word surrender a lot. I have trouble quite understanding it, but it's funny. I've heard it mentioned twice this week already. Maybe it's because of your book.
What was the most challenging part of the writing was to talk about that, because he surrendered to a higher power. Right. Now, when you say that, you're on tricky ground, because, people have concepts about God and they think you're getting Christian. But we did a pretty good job, I think, of describing what that's like. I'm not beating my own heart. I'm not plotting the orbits of the planets. There's some intelligence doing that. So whatever we call it, the surrender is to that higher intelligence. And then we relax, because we've got the best CEO possible running our lives. And that's how we describe surrender.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, that is great. There was something you talked about in your book, Larry, that really struck me as well. In addition to play, you talked about finding the madness in other people, because there was something kind of magical about that connection. And I think it takes a level of surrender to play and be crazy.
I must admit, I struggle a little bit with the word surrender, but it certainly takes a little bit of acceptance, or it takes a little bit of saying, well, this is what I want to do, and this is it. Because, why wouldn't you give into that? Because if you're worried about how people will judge you, that's an interesting thing. I think what's interesting, certainly creatively, when I look for other people as friends, people I cast or people I work with, I totally look for a touch of the madness. I think that, part of what I talk about is what's a touch of the madness versus a ton of the madness. I've certainly made the mistake of thinking, oh, what a lovely eccentric person. And go, whoa, and you have to take that risk. You might err on the wrong side. I mean, you might get the person somehow involved in your life who you think has a touch of the madness, and they don't. But you know what? So what? I mean, you just got to think of the ones who are right. No one bats 1,000. Think about, I'm not much of a sports guy, but think about baseball. If you bat 330, meaning you hit 1/3 of the time you get up to bat, you hit, and the other 2/3 you're out, you're the most successful guy in the history of baseball. So think of a fighter, like what I know about it. Think about it. If you win and you're a prize fighter and you're 50-0, you still get hit like 50 times every round and you win. So you have to just be willing to say, oops. And that's where I agree with kind of the term surrender. I like the idea that you're passionate, you focus, you do everything you can, and then what happens, happens. You just sometimes can't. I've had movies I thought would be crazy successful and they fail, and vice versa. And sometimes you go, well, maybe I can learn something and take the lesson, but next. You got to go on. What can you do?
Right. And I think that's a big part of it is, I've heard the term allow your genius to shine, allow yourself to trust your intuition. And in a way, surrendering to me is often going for it without having to know what the outcome is going to be. I know what I want it to be, but I go ahead anyway, even though the odds might be crazy.
Yeah, I think you have to do it. It's a great line in Star Wars. Never tell me the odds, kid. And I think that's wonderful.
Exactly.
Well,
I don't want to know.
I'm remembering one of my favorite commercials, which was Michael Jordan, and it shows him going through double doors saying, 1,312 times I've had the game ball and missed. 512 times I've taken the last shot and we lost the game. And all he does is repeat all his failures. And the last line is, and that is why I win.
Wow.
That's brilliant, because he just kept pushing through those doors and talking about his failures. But the subtext between the lines was he didn't stop. He just kept on going. And then in the end, he said, and that is why I win. It's brilliant.
I agree with that. And I think your point on writing is really the wonderful thing too. If you're doing what you love, then one, you're enjoying your life, which is really important. Two, I think your odds are being successful or greater, but you are enjoying your life. You are doing what you love. And that's all you can do. You can take a shot. You can do the best you can. And we're all worried what someone else will think. What if I fail? What will Susie think of me? What if what if is a pretty bad word, unless it's, well, what if I just try this and then you try it? You just got to go for it and have fun with it. And as I said, I think people are, more than I've ever seen in my life, afraid to be creative. I see so many people say, well, I have this idea, but I don't know. And even in just starting to talk about the book and do things like this, the amount of people who said to me, it's funny because I off the air, they'll say, I have that, and try. What do you get to lose?
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. What have you got to lose? You're going to lose if you don't play. Right.
Exactly. We're quoting, my favorite one is, you miss all the shots you don't take.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I had a humbling experience many years ago. I used to tour around a little bit because I'd written some books and do workshops and stuff. And this woman came up to me, I think in Australia, and she said, "Oh God, I've really been looking forward to seeing you. You were here 3 years ago, and I've been wanting to thank you." And so I was all ready to hear what it was I had said or written that had inspired her. She said, "Yeah, we sat together over lunch and you said da 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 da." And it's like, wait a minute. She appreciated me as a regular guy who had listened to her and not the guy on stage. And that was so humbling, because I realized that what she valued was me, like that I was a real person relating to her as a real person. And it wasn't some kind of brilliance that I'd shared. I have never forgotten that.
But you say it was humbling. Wouldn't that be very flattering? So even the not famous you is valued a lot. I mean, I think it'd be a very great experience.
Well, it was. I think, though, at that time, I was into my ego, like thinking I had wise things to share. Yeah, I was young. And that brought me down to earth and said, sure, write stuff, speak stuff, but be yourself, because that's what people really value. So it was a normalizing thing.
I get it. That's funny, but that's great. I think that's great. And I think, you never really know. I think in anything you do that goes out in the world, but books, music, movies, you never really know how people are going to interpret it. And I think once you let it go, you just got to let it go. I mean, people ask me a lot of times, well, if you could redo this movie, you could redo that movie, but that's like Sunday morning quarterbacking your life. You can't. So I never really think about that. I never really watch my movies when they're done, because you can't do anything anymore.
You can't re-edit it. You can't recast it. Yeah, it's interesting how that goes. I had a project one time that I got to do with a magazine called Omni Magazine, which was a sci-fi magazine, and I'd always wanted to do something with them as a kid. It was just like a dream to me. And I happened to be with a guy who had a touch of madness. He was just this wonderfully crazy guy, and I had told him about it, and he said, "Well, the publisher of the magazine, she's here today. She's got a book that she's presenting. It was at the booksellers convention. And he said, let's go get a book from her and pitch her the idea of something we could do. We didn't even know what it was, but we got in line to get up there and we started talking about what we could do. We were both music and audio producers at the time. And so we get up there, get the pitch, probably about 4 people before our turn. And then we step up there and she goes, hi guys. And we went, hey, really interested in your book. We've got a fantastic idea for you. And she sat back and said, really? We said, imagine this, the Omni audio experience in 24 channel surround sound. Can you get that? And she was like, you can do that? And we said, yes. And she said, be in my office Monday morning. I want to hear about this. We had no clue what we were going to do, but we pulled it off, you know?
That's great. Oh, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. You got to do
it was a touch of madness. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Your book comes out September, is it 15th?
12th.
Something like that.
September 12th.
September 12th. We'll put all that, we'll put that in the, up for people to see. Yeah. And I'm highly going to recommend it because I know so many people who will just love it for the stories, the wisdom that's there from your life, and a lot of friends in the entertainment biz that will just.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Great talking to you guys. I'm going to read your book. It sounds fascinating.
Thanks so much, Larry. Really great to meet you.
Thanks, guys. You too. Great talking. Thank you.
Yeah.